Welcome to Explosive Enterprises, and today we're getting our Stargate on with the Wii P90. This setup is interesting because it readily adapts to HPA. Just kidding, we're reviewing a new rendition of the GHK AUG. The V2 revision now has a steel receiver and— Just kidding, we're hunting Terminators with an actual laser gun. You know, having made the jokes, I think the setup we're actually reviewing is even weirder. This gun that looks like something out of Deus Ex is part of a whole pile of stuff related to the Tokyo Marui Saiga-12, courtesy of Innovative Tactical Productions, or ITP Airsoft. For full disclosure, all these parts were sent to us for free under the simple condition that we make a review. As usual, I'd like to reiterate that we will never accept any agreement that places editorial limitations on our content, but ITP is only asking for our honest feedback, and we are more than happy to provide that. So what we have here is a Bullpup conversion kit installed on a Saiga-12K, along with a modular suppressor with integral tracer unit and a host of minor upgrade parts. All these are worth discussing, but let's start with the major product, which is the Bullpup kit. This is a body kit, entirely composed of steel and CNC'd billet 6061 aluminum, which converts the Saiga into something akin to a greebled up 12-gauge rendition of an OTS-14 Groza. We all know the Groza, right? It's that crude 9x39 Bullpup AKS-74U that Russia made approximately 6.5 of before calling it quits, and yet it shows up in every video game set east of the Berlin Wall and is so popular as an ephemeral concept that people continue to pay upper 4 digits for Hephaestus's half-baked conversion of the now thoroughly obsolete GHK V2 AK. The ITP, on the other hand, is a purely fictional kit applied to the very entertaining TM Saiga, a gun we've featured twice now on the channel and continue to enjoy. So let's walk through the kit itself, then talk about how it performs and how it interacts with the other bits ITP sent us. Now obviously this has already been assembled, and we're not going to show the assembly process for two reasons. First, this poor Saiga has been disassembled and reassembled so many times already that some of the screws are threatening to strip out, so I'm erring on the side of leaving it alone as much as possible. And second, ITP has really great tutorial videos for both the 12K and SBS variants that show exactly what you need to do, and I don't think we can meaningfully add to them. So first off, at the back, the stock has been replaced with a solid aluminum butt pad with ribs for texture. It still mounts to the original hinge because it needs to pivot out of the way for takedown. Below, the original grip has been replaced by a block with sockets for a QD sling swivel, though personally I prefer to just use paracord to make a top sling attachment. The replacement trigger is visible on the underside, which is actuated by a linkage concealed by a stamped steel cover plate that has replaced the dovetail on the left side. On the right side, the kit comes with a magazine guide, which is also compatible with an unbullpupped Saiga as well. Then the front end is where all the real complexity is. To summarize, the kit includes a replacement short gas tube, and the 12K kit also includes an SBS length barrel. The kit reuses the original Saiga gas block, which the lower handguard screws into, while the upper handguard then clamps onto it from above and tensions against the gas block. Then the actual sight rail bolts onto the lower handguard as well, and now there are a bunch of options. This is the lowest sight mount provided by the kit, but it also comes with spacers that can raise it a bit higher. Flipping the rail itself while installing the risers additionally exposes a small front bead, but honestly this is kind of a useless configuration as the sight is quite low relative to the receiver and too close to the shooter's eye. A short section of rail can be installed over this backup iron though to permit mounting of an optic, though it's not clear why you would opt to do this over just using the full-length rail on the other side. The upper handguard also has slots that can be used to mount standard M-LOK accessories, so this is a straightforward means of attaching a light. And it has some fun markings, both a unique serial number and the designation Groza 12 in Cyrillic. The grip reuses the original Saiga trigger guard, but the grip itself is specific to the kit as it has cutouts to slip over the mount. That does mean other AK grips are not compatible without significant modification. There's also an interesting mechanism here, but we'll come back to that. For the barrel, the SBS length outer barrel does not fully enclose the 12K inner barrels, so it also comes with an extension that screws on. This Picatinny rail section is then both clamped to the barrel and screwed into the lower handguard so that torquing the rail will not unscrew the barrel. And the extension has the same threading at the end, so most of the marketing uses the standard Saiga thread protector, but I've installed my WeTech flash hider because I live in constant fear of my inner barrels taking a core sample of the local mud. Now after assembling this, my first thought was, okay, what was the point of bullpupping it if I've just gone and extended the barrel anyways? But then I drank some coffee and actually rubbed two brain cells together and realized that since the inner barrels come up to the end of this barrel, this is actually the exact same length as the short-barreled conventional Saiga configurations I had before. It just looks longer because the shortened gas system and short handguard leave more of the barrel protruding beyond the gas block. Overall, this is essentially a short-barreled Saiga minus the stock, and that does make for a very small gun. Mind you, it's not a light gun, and in fact the complete configuration you see here comes at 9 pounds or 4.1 kilograms. Again, I should reiterate that this is not a 3D printed kit like many Bullpup conversions on the market. This is all CNC'd aluminum and steel, and the weight adds up. And at the risk of sounding like a complete shill, I cannot overstate just how nicely these parts are made. The machining is exceptionally clean, with smooth, even anodization on the aluminum and bluing on the steel. More importantly, all the parts fit together perfectly, which if you've put together this sort of kit before, you know is not always the case. The only tweak we had to make was shimming the underside of the gas block slightly to get the lower handguard to align perfectly to the barrel, but that was an artifact of the donor gun being exceptionally worn and abused at this point. Beyond that, it was all drop-in. So the result is this 9-pound modular monstrosity of a shotgun, and now we can talk about how it works and handles. First off, the big reason the weight is noticeable is because even with this chunky Romeo 7, the center of balance is over the magazine, so it exhibits the classic Bullpup rear heaviness, but I find it's pretty easy to tuck into the shoulder and support that way. The gun also has quite a long length of pull, but this being a Bullpup, that's much less relevant than on a conventional rifle. The one thing that is annoying and cannot be easily addressed is how close the magazine is to the pistol grip, which causes the magazine to dig into my hand in what I would consider a natural grip posture. This isn't so hard to work around, and it's much less noticeable with gloves, but it is noticeable. The trigger is a common concern with Bullpups, but this is actually quite good. I mean, part of that is because the AK trigger is bad to begin with, but the trigger linkage being an arm that pulls the trigger sear forwards rather than a coat hanger pushing the trigger backwards means there's no slop whatsoever, and the reset spring is very light. There's a decent bit of over travel past the breakpoint, but it doesn't prevent rapid fire and would be dead simple to eliminate by shimming the front of the trigger to limit its travel. This is genuinely the least bad trigger pull I've encountered on any Bullpup AK, be it airsoft or real. Now, if you haven't seen this kit's unique gimmick before, you're probably wondering how you're supposed to reload it with the grip in the way, so let's address that. On either side of the lower handguard, there's a latch, and depressing it permits the pistol grip to unlock and swivel out about 45 degrees. This clears the magazine, allowing for the exaggerated rock and lock that the TM Saiga requires. It's a clever solution, but it feels awkward for a couple of reasons. First, while getting the magazine seated is made much easier by the magazine guide, there isn't a ton of space to work with, and it takes some practice to avoid whacking my hands together. Second, there's a little bit of a detent holding the gun locked in this 45-degree position, but it's very easy to overcome, which means that rolling the gun left will cause it to flop back closed. Third, this mechanism will not unlatch if any lateral pressure is being applied to the grip. That, plus the floppiness once the grip is unlatched, means I don't think the pure SBS configuration with maximally shortened barrel is a great idea. While you could just grab the body of the gun to hold it steady, it's easier with a foregrip, suppressor, or something to hold on to, so you can just flick to the side and tuck the gun before breaking your grip to reload. And fourth, if you're left-handed, no you aren't. The bolt carrier doesn't cycle far enough to give you the Ministry of Defense dental treatment with a normal stance, but a strong side reload is awkward at best. To be clear, none of these are deal breakers by any means, and the only way to avoid some level of weirdness would be to use a stubby grip positioned further forwards. The quirks of the latching mechanism can also be eliminated entirely by inserting a screw to lock the grip in the canted position, but boy do I hate those canted grips. Yeah, I know, it looked really cool when you first saw it in Tarkov, but the wrist strain is real, and in this case also makes it awkward to reach with the index finger. You fucking stop that. So here's what we suggest. When the gun runs empty, first unlock the grip, then tilt it right and tuck it firmly against your bicep. Swap mags with your left hand. Roll the gun left to lock the grip, charge it overhand, and back up to the shoulder. With a bit of practice, it's not too bad. Still not fast, but as we've talked about in prior videos, those magazines go a lot further than conventional rifle mags, so you shouldn't be reloading under fire all that often. I do really wish that the grip actually locked in the canted position though, just to keep it stable and rigid while reloading. Although having said all that, the obvious solution is to skip the moving grip entirely by using straight insert mags. Those don't yet exist for the gas mags, but HPA adapters have certainly proven popular, despite being associated with nozzle breakage. We'll circle back to this later. Next up is the optic height, because using the receiver as the cheek rest elevates the head relative to the bore. This setup with a Romeo 7 has a height over bore of 3.75 inches or 9.5 centimeters. If you're used to standard AKs with dovetail optics, this is a bit taller over the bore than a Cobra or PKA, but isn't as high over the stock. So there's plenty of scope here to tune the optic height relative to the cheek rest. Just note that using the receiver as the cheek rest intrinsically elevates the height of her bore by about 1.5 inches compared to a normal AK. At this point, we need to bring in another one of ITP's products, which is the modular suppressor. This is composed of a threaded base and an arbitrary number of threaded extension sections. By default, it includes a barrel stabilizer, and ITP's intent is that this can be used in lieu of a barrel extension to help cover the inner barrels as a cosmetic alternative. However, it can also accommodate the Ace-Tech Quark M tracer unit, which ITP also sells as an option. This is a Bifrost tracer unit with your choice of flash color, and obviously it's sized for a shotgun. With this full suppressor, the tracer unit can actually be threaded directly onto the SPS length barrel and just barely sits far enough forwards to still function. Or I can remove all but one of the extensions while still fitting the tracer, and then it can thread onto the end of the barrel extension. Cool concept, though I'm honestly not sure what else you can do with the modularity, but hey, if you have any clever ideas, let us know in the comments. In any case, adding the suppressor with a tracer unit out at the end of the barrel improves the balance a bit, though of course does no favors at all for the weight. That's it for the Bullpup kit and the suppressor, but we still have internal parts to discuss. For instance, this Saiga has been brought back from the brink of death by replacing its worn tri-nozzle return spring and ersatz substitute with a pair of ITP's tri-nozzle return springs. They also sent us a replacement nozzle return spring and rocket valve plus spring, so we have backups to permit experimentation, and these do seem to work just as well as the originals. If you've seen our follow-up video on the Saiga, you may recall that our number one concern was the lack of spare parts for things that break, so it's great to see manufacturers stepping up in that regard. That said, it's not all OEM spec parts. One of ITP's more interesting offerings is a magnetic piston system intended to counteract bolt bounce. The ITP system consists of a replacement piston in either SPS or 12K length with an integral magnet plus a corresponding gas plug with its own magnet. These magnets provide sufficient attraction to keep the bolt carrier locked forwards when it returns to battery, eliminating the bounce that can cause issues in a worn gun. In theory, this extra force would increase the amount of gas needed for blowback and accelerate both the impact of the carrier into the buffer and the impact of the carrier into the trunnion, but thus far we have not observed any changes to shooting characteristics, so we suspect the impact is minimal. And the last part we tested is a set of replacement inner barrels, the same 300mm length as stock. These don't appear to perform noticeably differently from stock. They might produce slightly better power consistency and accuracy owing to the gentler crown, but it's hard to be sure. The important thing is they're available to anyone with an SPS who wants to get up above 1 joule. ITP is also making 400mm barrels, which will fit in a standard 12K outer barrel and ought to produce a significant power boost over stock. Combine that with the 85% reduced hop-up chamber designed by I'm Broke, which we'll link in the description because he did a really great job of it, and it ought to be possible to build a Saiga that throws BBs somewhere close to 1.5 joules while still using weights around 0.32 grams. We've also tried out Miyagawa hybrid bucking specifically for the Saiga, and they do improve accuracy as promised, but unfortunately it looks like due to slight casting inconsistency, we see one barrel hop significantly more than the others, which is not ideal. So we're still using the stock buckings for now. So how does it all come together? Well, it's still Saiga. It still slings BBs as well as before, it's just a little shorter and differently balanced with a more awkward reload. The thing is, a shortened Saiga-12K is pretty manageable and not the sort of gun that really needs a bullpup kit to begin with, particularly one with these sorts of ergonomic quirks. If you already have a short barrel 12K, let alone a SPS, I don't think you're going to get much besides novelty out of this kit. But if you want a tracer, or those 400mm inner barrels, or both, then the bullpup arrangement lets you do that while keeping a very compact configuration. And with something like the AirTac HPA conversion, then mags are straight insert, and you can even get a 3D printable shell to make the requisite EPMs look like shotgun mags and not goofy paintball stuff. The elephant in the room is the price of the kit because this is around $600 USD. That's a lot. I don't think it's unreasonable for what it is, which is a pretty extensive set of CNC machined steel and aluminum parts. Not castings, not plastic, not 3D prints, actually machined from billet. For point of comparison, the Pup bullpup kit for real steel Saigas a little over a decade ago ran about $400 after adjusting for inflation, and that was an injection molded plastic clamshell with a far worse fire control solution and still needed an additional optics mount to be usable. The ITP kit is a real steel quality kit with a variety of configuration options priced accordingly, and has little details that sell it as something that could plausibly exist in the real world. The question you'll have to ask yourself is whether that quality, novelty, and flexibility are worth the price of an entire rifle. I will say I think there's opportunity here for a cheaper simplification if ITP were so inclined. The butt pad could reasonably be simplified in geometry or even made from injection molded plastic, the grip replacement could be omitted entirely, and the upper handguard assembly could be simplified into a single piece with a fixed low rail mount. Those changes would reduce machine time and material costs significantly, and it could be simplified further still by omitting the magazine guide and grip hinge mechanism entirely and selling it specifically for use with HPA, or perhaps designing a straight insert magwell for the gun as exists for real steel. It's tough because nobody who puts pride into their work wants to cut corners, but I suspect a large portion of the potential market for a novelty like this will be put off by raw sticker shock. Then again, there's a long history of body kits from Marui that cost more than the guns they're mounted on, so maybe it's just more of a boutique item for a niche audience. Decide for yourself whether whether that's you. In any case, the rest of the parts we've tested have been similarly high quality, and again reasonably priced for what they are. The internal parts provide solutions for identified problems, along with OEM replacements, and the opportunity to experiment with inner barrel length. The modular suppressor is an interesting design, and at under $80, not all that expensive for a machined aluminum can. That about covers everything. As always, if you like our work, consider checking out our Patreon or merch store linked in the description, and we hope you enjoyed this video.